Okay, so for this week's homework, you watched the PBS documentary, Cracking the Maya Code, where you learn about how the Mayan language was deciphered. One of the early questions asked you to identify three places that are brought up in the documentary. They are Palenque, Tikal, and Copan. Here are some pictures of Palenque, pictures of Tikal, pictures of Copan, modern day. Then there's the first series of questions that ask, how did the following individuals hinder the decipherment of the Maya code? So if your answer to these is how they helped, then your answer would be wrong, because I'm looking for how they hindered, not how they helped. So for Jean Froderick Waldeck, he drew these images incorrectly. He made it seem like they had Babylonian or Hindu influences, as in the example of drawing elephants when there were no elephants in the Americas. Diego de Landa, he was a Spaniard who burned hundreds of Mayan books. He was part of the Spanish Inquisition, and he tried to destroy all evidence of the writing of the Mayans. He associated it with kind of devil worship and the like. So he destroyed everything he could. Eric Thompson, he was British, and it was during the Cold War. So he refused to believe a Russian and the progress that was being made by a Russian because of the Cold War politics. And specifically, he believed that the glyphs were not sounds or syllables, only dates, astronomy, or whole words. And so this hindered the decipherment instead of being able to acknowledge the accomplishments that Narusov did during the Cold War. Then there are the four surviving codices. The Dresden Codex in Germany, the Madrid Codex in Spain, the Paris Codex in France, and the Grolier Codex in Mexico. What was it, 2 years ago? The Grolier Codex was in Los Angeles at the Getty Museum. And during winter break, I got to visit that museum. And so this is pictures that I took there, and this is a short video of it. And it is the oldest book written in the Americas that still exists. All right, then the next series of questions ask, how did the following individuals help contribute to the decipherment of the Mayan written language? Rafinesque was the first to decipher the numbers. And so the number 0, dots equal 1, the bars equal 5. But as I mentioned before, the Mayan number system is based on the number 20, not on the number 10. And so each placeholder gets multiplied by 20. And so, for example, here, this, this equals 5, and this does equal 6, but this 6 gets multiplied by 20. And so that it would be 120. And then these two together, would be 125. To help explain that, there's this writing. And so, for example, here is the number 22 or the number 30, where this one, because it's a placeholder in the 20s place, this would be 20, and these two are 2, so 22. Or 20 plus 10 is 30. 20 plus 13, 33. And so hence, the number 25, which you asked in the homework, would be 1 dot, and then space, and then below that would be 1 bar, 25. There are other ways of representing Mayan numbers. This is how they would appear in a monument, but that's not the way that you're being asked to learn. You're being asked to learn the way it was in the codices, the way it's addressed in the book. These are other ways of writing numbers as well. But the way you're being asked to learn is the way it was showed in the documentary, which is like this. Again, 25 would be like this. 20 and 5. Forstmann contributed to the decipherment of the Maya code in a number of ways. Forstmann realized that there was a long count, that there was a date from which they were counting, similar to our years, right? We're counting from, basically our idea of Jesus and Christianity being the number 0, and then we are in 2025 since that. Forstmann also figured out more of the math, the fact that they had a concept of 0. Also figured out that they were very knowledgeable in astronomy, specifically eclipses, and also figured out their calendar, where there's the numbers, there's the month. I forget which is which, but the point is this rotates to create a unique date for each day of the year. Then there is Tatiana Proskuriakov. She figured out that the Mayan writing, some of it was about history, specifically the history of rulers. And she also created 3D models of the pyramids and the cities to understand not only kind of what the ruins look like after 1,000 years or more, but rather what they look like at their time when they were built. Narasov. Narasov figured out that it was a mixed system, that these images, these glyphs, could mean words and syllables. This is the Russian, the Soviet, I suppose at that time, that whose contribution wasn't recognized because of the Cold War politics. And then Stewart goes on to figure it out himself. That many glyphs could stand in for the same syllables, and then there's a flood of decipherment, where we get to the point where something like 90% was deciphered. Students did a fair number of students did have trouble with describing Mayan writing abilities in different periods. So the classic Maya period is the height of Mayan civilization and the height of Mayan writing. So the height was not in 1491 before the Spanish came in and tried to burn all the books. The height was during the classic Maya period. It's when they did most of the writing, built the pyramids, created the stele with writing on it, wrote many of the books. They had people whose jobs it was to write. They're professional writers. That's what they did. And so the height of it is during the classic Maya period. Right before contact with Europeans, there were still hundreds, if not thousands, of books that existed. But we don't know how many of them still knew how to read and write. We don't know, unfortunately. So they were still being preserved. They were seen as important, because they made them survive hundreds of years, protecting them. But they weren't at their height. They were being preserved. And we don't know how much new writing was happening but most of it was happening during the classic period, not on the eve of contact. During colonization, the Mayan dialects survived, but their writing didn't. It's not that it didn't, it was attacked. The Mayan writing survived if it was written in, it survived verbally, and it survived if it was literally written in stone. But the books, anything that could be burned down was burned down and destroyed. As much of it as they could, except for those 4 books that we know still exist today. Yeah.
So there are people.
Oh, yeah, probably millions. Yes, in southern Mexico and in Guatemala would be the highest numbers, absolutely. Yes.
Was there just not much writing that was going on, or was there like adaptation to Spanish?
No, they weren't writing, they weren't doing new writing during the colonization. There was a little bit that was done just by the friars themselves to help evangelize the Mayan people. But not by the Mayans. Yeah, because they would be attacked and targeted for that, so. Yeah. Today, more than 90% has been deciphered. Now there's websites where you can learn, there's phone apps where you can learn Mayan writing. There's videos about it. A lot of the stele, a lot of the pyramids are being deciphered. And so there's Mayan people who's, in fact, I know people in Wisconsin who came from southern Mexico whose first language was Mayan. Their second language was Spanish, and their third language is English. So there's absolutely people who, lots of people who still speak Mayan today. And many of those people are beginning to learn. A lot of the history is being written for the first time as all this writing is being deciphered. And then there's people whose first language is Mayan or not, who are now learning how to write it. And so it's pretty awesome what's happening. Other comments, questions, things to go back to?